Move it, Grandma. Some of us have real work to do. Words floated down the hallway of Vantage Group's 13th floor like they'd been said 100 times before. Because they had been. Li Chen, 61 years old, 5 feet 2, wearing a gray uniform 2 sizes too big, kept her cart moving at the same steady pace. She didn't look up. She didn't slow down. She just pushed the cart past the cluster of account managers, laughing outside Conference Room B, their coffees steaming, their badges gleaming, their whole futures intact. One of them, a young man named Brett Fowler, cupped his hands around his mouth like he was calling to someone across a football field. "You missed a spot. Right there. No, there. God, do we have to do everything ourselves?" His colleague, Taylor Wynn, snorted so hard she had to cover her face. "I don't know why they even bother keeping her. She's slower than my grandmother's internet." Third one, a senior account manager named Derek Sloan. 28 years old, top 10 producer 2 quarters in a row, absolutely certain the world had been built for people exactly like him, didn't even look at Lily. He just stepped in front of her cart, turned his back to her, and continued his conversation like she was a piece of furniture. Lee stopped, waited, then went around him. Nobody noticed. That was the thing about Vantage Group's Chicago office. It was a machine. 42 floors of polished marble and floor-to-ceiling glass, named one of the top 10 commercial real estate firms in the country 3 years running, managing a portfolio that spanned 16 states. The people who worked there were young and hungry and convinced that hunger was the same thing as worthiness. Lily Chen had been cleaning their floors every morning for 11 months. Arrived at 6:15 every day. The cleaning crew's shift started at 6, so she was always early. She wiped down the elevator panels. There were 6 elevators, and she did all of them, then moved floor by floor, corridor by corridor, restroom by restroom. By the time the first associates arrived at 8, the glass was smear-free and the tile was spotless. Nobody thanked her. A few people said good morning in the first week. After that, she became invisible. Which was, of course, exactly the plan. What Brett Fowler did not know, what Taylor Wynn could not have guessed, and what Derek Sloan would one day replay in his mind for the rest of his career was that Lily Chen's full name was Lillian Margaret Chen. And the mattered, because Lillian Margaret Chen was listed on page 3 of Vantage Group's founding documents as co-founder and majority silent partner. She owned 54% of the company. Had built it from a single office in a strip mall in Naperville in 1987. Had watched it grow through 3 recessions, 1 market collapse, and a global pandemic. And for the past 11 months, she had been cleaning its floors because she needed to know before she died whether the company she'd built was still worth passing down. Been diagnosed with an aggressive form of lymphoma 14 months earlier. The prognosis was, at the time, 18 months. She had told no one at Vantage Group. She had told almost no one at all. Only her daughter, Hazel, who had begged her to spend that time resting, traveling, doing anything except strapping on a uniform and scrubbing floors. "Mom," Hazel had said, sitting across from her in the kitchen of the Lincoln Park house, hands flat on the table. "You don't have to prove anything." "I'm not proving anything," Lily said. "I'm looking." "Looking for what?" Lily had taken a long time to answer. Outside, the November rain was turning the backyard into a pond. She watched a leaf stick to the window and stay there. "Whether it still has a soul," she finally said. Hazel didn't argue after that. She understood her mother well enough to know that arguing was just a way of getting left behind. Cleaning crew was managed by a contractor named Phil, who had no idea who Lily was. She had applied for the position under a shortened version of her name, L. Chen, using an address in Pilsen and a phone number registered to a prepaid device. Phil had interviewed her for 7 minutes, checked that she could lift 30 pounds, and put her on the schedule. He paid her $16.40 an hour. A driver's license that said Lillian Chen. Phil had never looked closely enough to connect the dots. In the break room on the second floor, there was a whiteboard where the cleaning staff tracked their assignments. Lily's name appeared every morning in Phil's handwriting. Below it, sometimes in someone else's handwriting, things had been added. Once a drawing of a turtle, once the word useless, which had been partially erased but not fully. Lily photographed each one with her phone and didn't react. Other cleaning staff were kind to her. A young woman named Rosa, who worked the lower floors and sent money home to her mother in Guadalajara, sometimes saved Lily a seat at the break room table. An older man named Eugene, who had been with the contractor for 9 years and knew every inch of the building, once handed her a pair of extra knee pads without explanation. "Or wax on marble," he said, "kills you after a while." Lily accepted them gratefully. She wore them every day after that. Notice things. She was very good at noticing things. It was, her CFO had once told her, her most dangerous quality. Notice that the recycling bins on the 13th floor were always full of printed reports that should have been shredded, which meant someone in compliance wasn't following protocol. Notice that the client hospitality suite on 27 was used 3 nights a week for what appeared to be a poker game among 4 of the senior partners. Noticed that the after-hours cleaning log, which staff were supposed to sign every night, had been signed in the same handwriting for the past 3 months, which meant either one person was doing all the work or someone was falsifying records. She photographed all of it. He also noticed the people. Eric Sloan, she observed, was not simply rude to her. He was rude to everyone he considered beneath him, which included the receptionist, the mailroom staff, the cafeteria workers, and any associate who hadn't yet proven their number. He had a gift for cruelty that was almost clinical. He knew exactly how to make someone feel like they were taking up space. He was very careful about it. Never in front of a superior, always with plausible deniability, always with a smile that made you wonder if you'd imagined it. Taylor Wynn was different. Taylor was the kind of person who laughed because laughing meant belonging. She wasn't mean on her own. She was mean in groups because groups made it safe. Alone, Lily had caught her in the elevator twice, and both times Taylor had been polite. Briefly, reflexively polite. The way people are when they're not performing for anyone, but polite. Brett Fowler was the easiest to read. He was 26, new to Chicago and terrified of being ordinary. That terror had curdled into contempt. He treated anyone who made less than him as evidence that he had at least escaped some fate. It wasn't malice. It was fear wearing malice's coat. Lily noticed all of it. She wrote none of it down. She just held it. It was a morning in March when she was mopping the corridor outside the executive conference suite, and Derek walked past with 2 clients. Men in suits who had flown in from Atlanta, she'd heard, and he glanced at her and said, audibly, to no one in particular, "Don't worry, they'll get to it eventually. Speed isn't exactly the job requirement down here." Clients laughed politely. Lily kept mopping. But she had heard the clients' names earlier in the morning. She'd seen the visitor log at reception, and she knew that one of them, a man named Arthur Pemberton, had once been a friend of her late husband's. She wondered briefly if Arthur would recognize her. He didn't. She was invisible in the uniform. As she kept mopping. There was another morning, a Tuesday in April, when she was cleaning the women's restroom on the 13th floor, and she heard 3 voices come in. Taylor and 2 associates she didn't know by name. They were complaining about someone in HR who had written up one of their colleagues for a minor infraction. "It's ridiculous," one of them said. "We don't need to be policed like children." "I know, right," said another. "Like, who even filed the complaint?" Probably one of the janitorial people being sensitive. There was a pause. "Odd," said Taylor, and for a moment Lily thought she heard something that was almost discomfort in her voice. "Can we not?" What?" "Don't know. It's just, forget it." Conversation moved on, but Lily stood very still on the other side of the partition, mop in hand, and thought about that pause. That can we not. It was small. It wasn't nothing. She photographed nothing that day. She just thought about the gap between who people were and who they let themselves become, and whether that gap could ever close, and whether it mattered that it could. Weeks passed. Her treatments continued. She took the train to Rush on Thursday mornings before her shift, sat in the infusion chair for 3 hours, and was back on the 14th floor by noon. The nurses at Rush had learned to let her sit quietly. She always brought a legal pad and worked through whatever she needed to work through. Once, a nurse asked what she was writing. "Budget projections," Lily said. Nurse assumed she meant household expenses and nodded sympathetically. "I did not mean household expenses." Her oncologist, Dr. Patricia Morrow, had been cautiously optimistic since February. The lymphoma was responding. Not in remission, not yet, but responding. Dr. Morrow had revised the prognosis to 3 years, possibly 5. Lily had received this information and then asked if she could reschedule her next appointment because she had a work conflict. Dr. Morrow had stared at her. "I'm serious," Lily said. "I know you are," said Dr. Morrow. "That's what concerns me." It came to a head on a Wednesday in May. Lily was in the lobby, ground floor, main atrium, the big marble space with the waterfall installation that had cost $280,000 and that Lily had always privately considered excessive, finishing her morning sweep before the 8 o'clock rush. The lobby was still mostly empty. A few early arrivals, the security desk, the reception island in the center with its enormous arrangement of white orchids. Eric Sloan came through the revolving door at 7:52, coffee in hand, phone to his ear. He was laughing at something the person on the phone had said. He walked past the security desk, past the orchids, and directly toward the wet section of floor that Lily was finishing. The section with the bright yellow caution sign standing right in the middle of it. He didn't slow down. His foot hit the damp tile, slipped slightly, and the lid on his coffee came loose. Hot coffee splashed across his hand, his cuff, and the floor Lily had just cleaned. Looked at his hand. He looked at the floor. He looked at Lily. "Are you kidding me?" he said. "Can you put a sign up? What is wrong with you?" "A sign is right there," Lily said. She said it without heat, the way you'd say the sky is blue. He stared at her. Something in her calmness seemed to make it worse. "Right," he said. "Great, super helpful. You can clean this up now." Walked away. At the elevator bank, he said something to Brett, who had just arrived, and Brett looked over his shoulder at Lily and laughed. Rosa was nearby, near the supply closet. She had seen the whole thing. She looked at Lily with an expression that mixed sympathy and fury in equal parts, the expression of someone who had seen this kind of thing too many times to be shocked by it, and not enough times to be numb to it. Lily looked at Rosa, and then looked at the coffee on the floor, and then began cleaning it up. "Okay," Rosa said quietly. "Yes," Lily said, "I am." And she was. But something had also shifted that morning. Some internal clock she'd been running against had reached its count. They finished her shift. She said goodbye to Eugene. She changed out of her uniform in the locker room in the basement and folded it carefully and set it on the shelf. Then she took the elevator, one of the staff elevators, not the main lobby elevators, up to the 42nd floor. Not been to the 42nd floor in 11 months. Her key card still worked. Of course it did. Nobody had thought to deactivate it, because nobody knew she'd been coming in through the service entrance for nearly a year. Executive floor was quiet. Lily walked past the assistant stations, past the corner offices with their city views, and into the boardroom at the end of the hall. It was empty. She sat down at the head of the table. Her table, the one she'd chosen in 1999 when they moved into this building, and she took out her phone and scrolled through 11 months of photographs and notes. And she called her attorney. "I'm ready," she said. His name was Richard Holt, and he had been Lily's attorney for 23 years, and he asked no unnecessary questions. He simply said, "I'll have everything prepared by Friday." Meeting was called for the following Tuesday at 9 in the morning. It was described in the calendar invite as a mandatory all-hands leadership update. This was unusual. All-hands meetings at Vantage Group happened once a quarter, and the next one wasn't scheduled until July. So there was a low current of anxiety running through the office by Monday afternoon. Rumors moved through the floor the way rumors always do in offices, which is to say quickly and inaccurately. Eric told Brett he'd heard it was about a merger. Brett told Taylor he'd heard it was about layoffs. Taylor told 3 other people it was about a new regional expansion, which made no sense given the current market. But anxiety makes people want good news, so the good news version traveled fastest. 8:55 on Tuesday morning, the ballroom floor on the 42nd floor was full. Every vice president, every director, every senior account manager. Derek was in the 3rd row, right center. Taylor was near the back. Brett was standing along the wall because he'd arrived late, and the chairs were full. At 9 o'clock exactly, the door at the front of the room opened. Lily walked in. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit, a white blouse, and her hair was done the way she used to wear it before she got sick, pulled back, clean, precise. She was carrying a leather portfolio that she set on the podium with a quiet click. She looked at the room. The room looked back at her. Eric Sloane's expression went through several phases in about 4 seconds. Confusion, recognition, partial, flickering, the kind that arrives before the brain can make sense of it. Then something else, something closer to the sensation of the ground becoming unreliable beneath your feet. Richard Holt stepped to the podium beside her and said, "Good morning. For those of you who don't know, which, I understand, is most of you, my name is Richard Holt. I represent Ms. Lillian Chen, founder of Vantage Group and majority shareholder, who will now address the company she built." A silence was the kind that has texture. Lily looked at the room for a long moment. "Some of you have seen me before," said. "Not here, downstairs." She paused. "I've been working in this building since last June. I cleaned your floors. I emptied your trash. I mopped the lobby every morning before most of you arrived." Another pause. "I want to be very clear that I'm not telling you this to embarrass anyone. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand that I have been watching this company very carefully for 11 months. And I have a great deal to share with you about what I saw." Opened the portfolio. Next 40 minutes, Lily went through it. The compliance failures, the falsified cleaning logs, which turned out to implicate a facilities manager who had been skimming contractor hours, the after-hours use of company property, the culture, and she spent the most time here, longer than anywhere else, the way people treated the people they believed were beneath them, and what that said about the kind of company Vantage Group had become. Didn't name Derek Sloane by name. She didn't name Brett or Taylor by name. She presented what she had observed as a pattern, not a prosecution. But she said this: "I was in this lobby on a Wednesday morning in May when a senior account manager walked through a clearly marked wet floor, spilled his coffee, and then spoke to the woman cleaning it the way you wouldn't speak to a dog. And no one in that lobby said a word. Not security. Not the other people waiting for the elevator. No one." She paused. "That is not the company I built. And it is not the company I intend to leave behind." Derek stared at the floor in front of him. His jaw was tight. His hands were very still. Lily closed the portfolio. Vantage Group will be undergoing a full leadership audit over the next 90 days, she said. Richard's office will be contacting individual teams. In the meantime, I'm pleased to announce that 2 members of our building services staff, Eugene Larson and Rosa Mendez, will be joining the company's new Employee Culture Advisory Board, effective immediately with full compensation adjustment. They know this building and the people in it better than anyone in this room. That's not an accident. That's a consequence. He looked at the room one more time, at the faces, at the confusion and the shame, and, here and there, something that looked almost like relief. The relief of people who had known something was wrong and hadn't known how to say it. I built this company to mean something, she said quietly. I still believe it can, but it's going to require some of you to become different versions of yourselves. I hope you're willing. Then she picked up the portfolio and walked out. Eric Sloan resigned 3 weeks later. He cited personal reasons. His letter was 2 sentences long. Richard Holt forwarded it to Lily with a note that said simply, "As expected." Brett Fowler did not resign. He asked, through his direct manager, whether he could request a meeting with Miss Chen. The request was granted. He came in, sat down across from her, and said, without any preamble, without any excuse, "I'm sorry. I don't have a defense. I just want you to know I heard you." Lily looked at him for a long moment. "That's a start," she said. "Show me the rest." He stayed. Whether he became different, only time would tell. But he started trying, and sometimes that is the first real thing. Miller Wynn sent a handwritten note to Rosa through the internal mail system. It said, "I should have said something a long time ago. I'm sorry I didn't. I'm going to try to do better." Rosa read it twice, then pinned it to the inside of her locker, where she kept the things that mattered. Lily did not return to the cleaning crew. She did, however, occasionally arrive early on Thursday mornings, after her infusion appointments, which were now monthly, and sometimes in the quiet hour before the building filled up, she walked the floors. Not with a cart, not in uniform, just walking, looking at the marble, the glass, the city outside the windows. Eugene told her once, when he encountered her on the 7th floor at 6:45 in the morning, that she was the strangest person he'd ever met. "Probably," she agreed. "You could be anywhere," he said. "You could be doing anything." "I know," she said. "Oh, so why are you still walking these floors?" And she thought about it. The way she always took her time before answering something that deserved a real answer. "Because I want to remember what it felt like," she said. "To be in a place and have no one know who you are. To be judged by nothing but how you show up." She looked down the corridor. Most people never get to know what that feels like, whether they pass or fail. Eugene nodded. He'd worked in buildings for 30 years. He understood something about being judged by how you show up. "Did you?" he asked. "Pass?" Lily smiled. It was a quiet smile, the kind that had already made peace with whatever came next. "I think so," she said. "But the floors were very clean, so maybe that counts for something too." Eugene laughed. A real laugh, the kind that comes from somewhere honest. And it echoed down the empty corridor of the 42nd floor as the city below began to wake up, and the elevators began to fill, and another day at Vantage Group began the way all days begin. With someone, somewhere, deciding what kind of person they were going to be today. I keep thinking about the moment Lily walked back into that lobby, not with a mop, but with a leather portfolio and 30 years of quiet proof. Nobody in that room saw it coming. And I think that's the whole point. There's something that happens when you strip away every marker of status, the title, the office, the salary, the deference people give you because they know who you are, and you just show up. As a person. As a body doing work. What's left after all of that is gone is the only thing that was ever really real anyway. Lily knew that. She spent 11 months betting on it. What I find myself sitting with is this. The way Derek treated her wasn't an accident. It wasn't a bad day or a moment of weakness. It was a habit, a slow accumulation of small choices, to look past someone, to speak over them, to treat their presence as an inconvenience that had become so natural he didn't even register he was doing it anymore. That's how it works. Not with some dramatic villainous decision, but with 1,000 tiny surrenders of the better version of yourself until one day the worse version is just who you are. And the consequences of that don't announce themselves. They just arrive. The way Lily arrived in that boardroom on a Tuesday morning in May. What strikes me about Lily, what I think about when I think about the kind of person I want to be, is that she never stopped seeing clearly. Even when she was invisible to everyone around her, she was paying attention. She noticed the compliance failures. She noticed the falsified logs. She noticed the gap between who Taylor was alone in an elevator and who Taylor became in a crowd. That kind of attention, the discipline to keep looking honestly at the world, even when it's uncomfortable, even when what you find is hard, that takes something most people don't practice enough. It takes the willingness to think carefully when it would be easier to just react. And there's what she did with 11 months of chemotherapy and a diagnosis that told her time was limited. She didn't stop. She kept showing up, kept working, kept building towards something. Not out of stubbornness, out of love for the thing she'd built, for the people in it, for the possibility that it could still become what she'd always believed it could be. That kind of endurance isn't about ignoring pain. Ajin saw her every morning. He knew she wasn't pretending. She just decided, over and over again, that the work mattered more than the discomfort. I think about Brett, who came in and said, "I'm sorry," without any excuse attached to it. That took something too. It would have been easier to resign like Derek, to close the door on the whole thing and start somewhere fresh where no one knew. But Brett stayed. He chose to be looked at. That's where real change lives, not in the clean start, but in the decision to stay inside the mess you made and try to do better inside it. What Lily's story keeps showing me is that character isn't a fixed thing. It's a daily decision. The person you are at 8 a.m. when no one's watching is the only reliable data point. Everything else is performance. And the world, people like Lily, eventually sees the difference. She said she wanted to know if the company still had a soul. I think she also wanted to know if the people in it still had a chance at one. Some of them did. Some of them proved it. And that, in the end, is about as hopeful a thing as I know how to say.